We do want to welcome on Aaron Wilson, who does cover the Texans and the NFL for KPRC2 out there in Houston. Boots on the ground, surrounding the Texans is, very knows that team very well. And Aaron, first of all, thanks for coming on the Blue Horseshoe podcast, joining us here. But from a Colts perspective, we are looking at this draft, and we really thought for the most part it's going to be in some order Bryce Young and CJ Stroud going 1 and 2. And really the draft started at 3, and the Colts were going to have to decide between Will Levis and Anthony Richardson. And now, really, there's been kind of some talks and whispers throughout, but now you're really starting to see real push reports wise that maybe Houston, if Bryce Young, and that right now is a betting favorite to go number 1, does go number 1, that the Texans will pass on a quarterback at number 2. Are you buying that if Bryce Young goes to the Panthers, the Texans will not take Stroud or Richardson or Levis there at pick number 2?
Yes, and I will go ahead and go a little further.
Hmm.
Bryce Young will be a Panther. Multiple league sources have told me that to take that to the bank, that Bryce is a Panther. It just needs to become official. So 9 days from now, Bryce Young joins the Carolina Panthers. So does CJ Stroud become a Texan? No, not necessarily. And I could see them passing on him. Several sources have expected that to happen and that they will do a trade back scenario. And under that scenario, who are they trading with? Is that going to be the Raiders? It's going to be the Seahawks. Could it be the Colts even though that's so rare to help each other in the division? So what might happen? And there's scenarios where what if there are no trades? What if two defensive players go off at 2 and 3 with Arizona after the Texans? And what if the Colts could draft any quarterback other than Bryce Young? Good situation for them to be in. And they've done a lot of work on the quarterbacks. They've met with all of them. They have high opinions on Anthony Richardson, Will Levis, or they like CJ Stroud. They don't seem to be as, maybe put off by some of the quarterbacks. Whereas the Texans, they've liked Hendon Hooker. They've been Bryce Young fans. Bryce Young wanted to play for the Texans because of the game that I'm sure you guys were there as well. The Colts losing that game when Rodney Thomas mistimed his leap. Jordan Akins catches the touchdown on 4th and 20. Desperation heat from Davis Mills. And then the 2-point to put it away. And they win the game, lose the number 1 overall pick. Then were unable to trade with the Bears. They talked about trades with the Bears. Didn't happen. Didn't get worked out. It was going to take 2 and 12. That would have gotten it done at that time before the Panthers entered the picture. The Texans entertained a potential, hey, what if we would give you our 2024 first-round pick to the Chicago Bears? And that was not enough. And ultimately, the deal stalled out. The talk stalled out, and they could not reach a compromise. And that's why they're where they are. And some people call it no man's land at 2, if you don't have a quarterback that you have a strong conviction about. And I tend to agree with that a little bit. But they're not one player away, and this is something I can't say this enough. This is not a great quarterback class. There's something wrong with all these quarterbacks. Not fatal flaws, but there's enough to pick apart. There's no Justin Herbert. There's no Joe Burrow. There's no Trevor Lawrence. None of these quarterbacks compare to those guys. I'll be surprised if any of them in a speedy manner are as good as those players. So where does that leave you? You're just basically, you have to have quarterbacks. It's a quarterback league, and people, that need quarterbacks have to draft quarterbacks in most cases. If you're the Texans and you want to take a longer approach, or you have some other ideas, you can do that too. But there's no one saying you have to draft a quarterback. I think that's where they're at. Draft a quarterback if you love one. Don't draft one that you are lukewarm about.
It's really interesting, because I know you've been down there in Houston for a while. You have your pulse down there. What do you think the appetite of the fan base is if they pass on a quarterback at number 2?
They'll be mad, but I think the real informed fans are starting to pick up on what we're telling them, that, and I'm not going to really get into why, they don't like any of the player, not like, but don't like them enough to pick them at 2. I would just, I don't want to stay away from that. I don't want to do anything that might just be too much information on those guys. But what I would say for the fans, they're upset because they were led to believe for a while, earlier in the draft process, hey, can't lose, get Bryce or Stroud, all good. And then as you go through the draft process, teams do some digging, they get some information, and they kind of just decide, well, we might prefer to do something else. And they're right. One thing that Houston did right after the combine, after we left Indianapolis, they prioritized bringing in a couple of players for visits that were high profile guys. Will Anderson Jr. from Alabama, really clean prospect, no red flags at all, just, good character, good football player. And Hendon Hooker, wanting to check him out, know more about his knee injury, know more about him. And he was really good before he injured his knee. ACL tears, that's not a big deal nowadays. Deshaun Watson had one of those. Deshaun Watson had one in the NFL. You eventually make it back. And you'll be good as new. So, Hooker is more of a longer play. Maybe it's kind of a redshirt year, but he's absolutely a very good football player. And by all accounts, I've heard, a good guy.
Aaron, if you don't want to talk about why the Texans don't like CJ Stroud, how about when? Was this when the draft order, was announced? Did the Texans kind of right away kind of know it was Bryce or bust, or this is as they've dug in, combine, pro day, meeting the visits, and it's kind of separated where it's really, okay, Bryce and then everyone else?
I think it's more that as you look into it and you reach a feeling about a player, consensus. And they wanted Bryce, and Bryce wanted them. And now it's not going to happen. And so that's a disappointment. And what's Bryce going to do? Tell the Panthers, don't draft me? No, of course not. And the Panthers aren't, as we're talking, or maybe shortly before, Scott Fitterer said, they're not looking to trade the pick. So
Right.
It's over. He's going to be a Panther.
From your perspective, because you've done a lot of the same work that we have done here, trying to figure out what this quarterback class looks like and how it should be ranked. How would you rank these four quarterbacks that are most often talked about at the top of this draft?
As far as now or upside? Are you thinking now?
Now, as far as what they'll be like in year one.
Okay, where they'd be like in year one, I would be pretty traditional about that. I would go Bryce Young. I would go with CJ Stroud. I think he's more ready than Anthony Richardson and Will Levis. I think Richardson has more upside than all these quarterbacks combined. I really like the future. Maybe you're getting in on something like that's like Amazon or Tesla early stock with him. But yeah, I just like him better. I think that he can be coached. I think he can improve. I think he's, impressed everybody throughout the draft process. Not just the tests. He's tested really well with the S2 cognitive test, with the Wonderlic, with the interviews. He's really aced the whole draft process. That's the feedback I've been getting on Anthony Richardson.
Aaron, with now seeming like the Texans not going to take a quarterback, do you think it's more likely that they stay there and pick and maybe take a Will Anderson Jr., or is it more likely they try to trade down? And if so, have you heard any trade partners or any teams kind of calling the Texans at number 2 to kind of try to get up to maybe either get a Stroud or an Anderson, or a Richardson?
They're already getting calls, and I'd be surprised if one of them isn't the Raiders. I think that the Raiders are a team. Watch out for them. Watch out for the Seahawks. Those are teams that could be on the move up.
I think that's it for me. I just, I want to say thanks, Aaron, for joining us and for really great info. The one thing, I guess I would ask, just in kind of parting, what was the mood when Lovie Smith went for 2 and won that game? What was the mood in Houston? Was there celebration, or was there, hey, we just lost the number 1 overall pick?
It was the latter. People were upset, but it's hard to legislate losing. The only way they can make them lose would be to make those players inactive, like Brandon Cooks, Jordan Akins, Davis Mills. And that's a really bad look to tank a game. Remember all the, off the Eagles a few years ago, and they didn't want to be in that spot. They've had a lot of bad PR down here, George, as you know. Sometimes you you should be better off punting than doing something that's, really manipulative like that. And it hits a lot of people the wrong way. And it really bothers players because they're out there fighting. And, I think you should never really underrate, the man in the arena, how they feel. Because it's really easy for us. We don't have any skins in the game. Like, we're watching, or it's easy to second guess. That's what we do. That's the fun of it all. But I always have to respect these guys are on the field. They're putting their, bodies on the line, probably their future, brain health, their brains on the line. A lot of things that go on with that. It's Lovie Smith's last game. He's going to be a head coach, in my opinion, ever in the NFL. I don't know if he'll might want to coach a college. Who knows? But that's my opinion, and I'm probably right. I think that he won't get another head coaching position. So he wanted to go out a winner. That's what he did. And it was a fluky play. I mean, if Rodney Thomas had jumped better and he's capable of making that play, he's a good football player, then we're having a different conversation, and they're going to get Bryce Young. And so it was a franchise and league altering outcome of a meaningless football game. How about that? We were there.
That it was. Aaron, I just want to finish up with this really quickly here. I saw Peter Schrager put out his mock draft earlier today, and he had the Colts trading up with the Texans at pick number 2. You said the Texans are getting calls. Do you think there's any chance we see an in-division trade and the Colts and the Texans would swap places at 2 and 4?
No.
Okay.
No, all respect to Peter. I like Peter. I don't agree with him. I thought there was some things that in there I didn't really read it. I don't know. And this is I don't really care about anyone else's stuff. I'm more just like, I only know what I know.
Right.
I can't go off anybody else. So I always take the position of, I have to check. I can't be like, oh yeah, they said it. They're good. I don't care. Doesn't matter. You could tell me it's Red Smith or whomever. I always have to check. And I don't like to go off other people's information. I like to go off of what I know firsthand. And I have a real rule of thumb. Secondhand sources you can have 5 of them, but won't equal 1 firsthand. So like on the Nick Caserio thing, if you're not talking to Nick or Bill Belichick, then you're talking to someone that's not directly involved. So
right.
Probably should avoid the story, or avoid like saying, really paint yourself into a corner. So yeah, when it comes to that, would Chris Ballard and Nick Caserio do a trade? I mean, it'd have to be great terms. They'd have to get a ton back, and you're going to play against this guy twice a year. So it really makes no sense unless you think the player that they're trading up for, that you think they're not very good, and maybe that you don't agree with their evaluation, and they're not going to even tell you who they're trading up for. Like, let's say if Chris made that call, he's not saying to Nick, "Hey Nick, I really want Stroud. I want this spot. What I got to do?" I mean, you're just weakening your leverage. So there's just no way. I mean, it's possible, but it's not. It's a really unlikely scenario. So that's when it kind of lost some credibility for me right there. I don't know. I mean, George, you're in Indy. What do you think?
No, I'm with you 100%. I can't say it. And I don't know. I read a little bit more into that. He had DeForest Buckner going back to Houston in the deal. And I can't see Chris Ballard wanting to play DeForest Buckner twice a year. I agree 100%. I don't see that working.
Injuring his new rookie quarterback.
Right.
Right. These guys are wrecking ball. Yeah. I mean, but they have Sheldon Rankins and Malik Collins here. Not that they're the same quality as DeForest, but
right.
Those are starting defensive linemen last time I checked, and they can draft one. So why do they have to do that trade? So I don't know. I think, yeah, sometimes I watch everybody. I respect everyone. I respect Peter, but that's where it lost credibility for me right away. I was like, yeah, I don't know. I don't think so.
It seemed like clickbait to me. I'm with you. I mean, I think Peter does a great job. But it seemed to me like
not
just
really,
trying to get some attention.
More personality than like a hardcore reporter, but occasionally, like, yeah, I'll have like the odd scoop here and there, or like at the Matt Filer one day. But it's just like, yeah, occasionally I'll have something, but most of the time doesn't have like that type of stuff. That's more like left for the other reporters. So yeah, it's not a knock on him. It's just he's a studio guy. He's a host and interviewer and author, and yeah, he's great. But he's on television mostly. Yeah, he's not like out there with a ton of like transactional scoops or trade stuff. We'll see. I just don't think, maybe somebody tells the Texans they should do Stroud. Maybe the owner steps in. I don't know. I think if he's hearing from he doesn't like to meddle Cal McNair. If he's hearing from the football people that, that's not the guy, then he'll be on board with it. Whatever they do, I mean, they're not one player away. That's the thing, is that the perceived desperation. This is year one for D'Amico. Why is the organization like, they had 3 wins last year? What if they win 6 this year? Okay, well, that's improvement.
Right. Is it the number 2 slot, Aaron, or is it the quarterbacks themselves that are giving the Texans pause? Like if they trade down, let's just say, for argument's sake, it's the Raiders. So they go from 2 to 7. Is there a chance that the Texans, okay, now they're at 7, if Richardson is still on the board or Levis is still on the board, they're even Hendon Hooker, they're take them because it's a 7 slot, it's a little bit lower? Or is it for them, they've just come to the conclusion, it's Bryce Young, head and shoulders, we love him, and we're not in love with any of the other quarterbacks. So wherever, if they trade down, wherever else they're picking in round 1 or 2, they're really not going to take a quarterback.
Well, no, they're quarterbacks. They just wouldn't rate them at that spot more so. But there's quarterbacks that they like and could conceivably draft. It's a lot. It's kind of a combination of 2, the preference for Bryce. It's all those factors.